What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. And welcome back to yet another video with your man, Immersioholic. And ladies and gentlemen, today we're checking out the Reformo Numidam mod, submod I should say, for the Divide Impera overhaul mod for Total War Rome 2. Reformo Numidam, or what I'll be referring to as RN sometimes, was made by user Swaraj, and Swaraj has come in and given the Masaesyli an entirely new overhaul, basically reforming the entire Numidian experience, hence the name Reformo Numidam. Before this submod, the faction had very few units, a very tiny roster, a boring and predictable starting position with very few challenges. It was very bare bones and really not all that appealing unless you had a very specific historical interest in the area. Now the faction features new units and new unique mechanics. These include having its own unique civil war, unique unification reforms, new buildings, and more. So now, let's talk about them all a little bit more in detail, and you can find out why now is the perfect time to check out the Masaesyli. Let's do it. Alrighty, so let's check out the first massive feature, which is of course the new units. By the way, I'll leave timestamps on the video so you can go back and forth throughout it to see different aspects of this submod. But anyway, right now we're checking out the new units that this submod adds. So initially you'll notice 5 completely new units to the roster. We'll go through them here and then I'll talk about the other new units after, but there's actually quite a lot of units that have been added. However, these are the units that you'll probably notice first early on in your campaigns. First off, we have the Cartho-Numidian Archers. These guys are very well equipped with a massive 25 armor, which is very good for a mid-tier archer unit, and they have a good attack and melee defense of 11 each. Basically, these guys are the perfect mid-tier archer for you. They don't have the highest range, they don't have the highest damage, but they have a good armor that means that they will be able to survive against enemy skirmisher fire for a while. Plus, that melee attack and defense means that they can actually survive for more than 5 seconds in combat. I still wouldn't want to use them too much for melee, but if you absolutely have to, they will survive for a decent amount of time considering they're an archer. By the way, I'll be talking about how you can get these units in the reform section after this, so hang on to that. Next up, we have the Carthaginian Numidian Lancers, otherwise known as the Cartho-Numidian Lancers. These guys have come from Carthage, and as such, they are incredibly well armored at a whopping 41 with a very high attack and a good charge, but their low melee defense is very, very low. It's their biggest weakness, and it means that these guys are very specifically a shock cav unit in the purest sense. You want to charge these guys into the rear of the enemy, get them the hell out, and then keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. You do not want them to get stuck in any kind of extended melee. Even though they have a very good armor, they'll still die quite quickly because they have a very low melee attack, and so they'll be taking a lot of hits. Plus, they're on horseback, so they're going to have a larger hitbox than many other units. However, one thing to note is that they have the Numidian Horse, which means that they're extremely fast and they can ignore terrain, which is a massive deal, and it means that charging into the rear of enemies in forests and such will still be incredibly powerful, just as if you were charging into them on open ground. Next up from Carthage, we have the Carthaginian Hoplites. These are an excellent mid/high tier hoplite unit. They're weaker than elite hoplites of other factions, but they're also better than many of the mid-tier hoplites of other factions. So these guys will probably be classified best as a high-tier hoplite unit. They have a fantastic armor of 35, which allows you to have an excellent main battle line. If you want to have a little bit more of a conventional Carthaginian style army, then these guys are the ones to use for your main battle lines. The Numidians haven't really had this option before. They do have the noble spearmen, but these guys are definitely a step above that, and they have the excellent phalanx ability, so these guys will survive for a while in combat. They're resistant to heat, however, the stamina is still poor, so after a while of fighting, they will get worn down, and once they get exhausted, they will get cut down pretty easily, so be careful about that. Fantastic looking unit. I'm very excited to use this in my own campaigns as Masaesyli whenever I do them in the future. Our fourth unit we're discussing is the Libyan Heavy Chariots. It's a decent chariot unit, but it isn't as heavy, for example, as the Pontic Chariot unit, which is probably the best chariot unit in the game. So this is a step down from that, but it is still slightly better than the low tier chariots of, say, the Britannic factions such as the Iceni. Slightly better though, not by a massive amount, although they do have scythes on the chariots, so they do get extra kills from that. Hence, they can be quite powerful if you can use them correctly. Just don't let them get hit by skirmisher fire or bogged down in an extended melee. Keep these guys on the move, they will require a lot of micromanagement on your own part. And then the last specific unit we're going to talk about is the Numidian late camels. Now these guys are camel cavalry. That means that they're going to have a scare effect against other cavalry units, which is perfect. Plus they have something that's very cool, and they have the guerrilla deployment ability. This is something unique to the Masaesyli in that almost all of their cavalry units have the guerrilla deployment ability, which means that you can ambush and surprise the enemy extremely easily. It will help you out massively in your battles against players and the AI alike. Overall, the camel unit is a solid mid-tier cav that will do very well against other cav. It even has a very good armor at 28, so get it into fights with other cavalry, give them some time, and they will grind down most mid-tier, maybe even high-tier cav units they go up against over a long period of time. But that's the last specific unit I want to talk about. However, that is not where the new unit stops. For example, all cavalry that is part of the Masaesyli actually get an entirely new unit based off them. These are the reformed units. So basically, these units should have better equipment, so hence better armor and damage. However, it doesn't always mean that all of their other statistics will be the same. For example, if a unit is heavier in armor, chances are it's going to be lower in stamina. And then the melee attack and defensive stats have been adjusted to make the units not too powerful. But again, generally speaking, the more expensive the unit, the better it's going to be in general. So every single cavalry unit the Masaesyli have has a brand new unit that they get to after reforms are hit, which is super exciting, and it gives you even more variety while still staying true to the Masaesyli style, which is of course very cavalry centered. And now the last aspect to talk about the new units is that you actually have access to some mid-tier Carthaginian naval ships, and you finally get access to a supply naval ship, which you didn't before as a Masaesyli. So this means that you can actually send your armies across the ocean without them taking massive amounts of attrition very quickly. In addition, you also actually have a chance on the ocean using the mid-tier Carthaginian ships, plus the new specific javelin naval ship that you get as a Masaesyli for your own style. Basically, you get access to greater naval options. You're still going to get wrecked by Rome in the late game, but early on you actually do stand a chance against them, especially if you manage to take out Carthage early on, and then it's you and basically a Polybian era Rome. You will have a decent chance against them if you can micro appropriately, of course. Next up, we have the new reforms set up for the Masaesyli. Now initially, this was based entirely on the Roman reforms, and the Masaesyli will get their reforms at the same time. However, now it's been adjusted slightly, where first off, you have to wait until you have 50 turns passing your campaign. Once that's done, then you have to defeat your other North African neighbors that are very close by to you, such as the Masaesyli and the Gaetuli to your west. You also have other factions to your southeast, but basically, you have to take out all of the other African nations around you besides Carthage. Once you take them out, and you'll also get pop-up events, by the way, stating once you've done so, you will then get access to a bunch of new units. These units include the Cartho-Numidian archers, the Cartho-Numidian lancers, the Carthaginian hoplites, and the Libyan heavy chariots. Plus, you will also get access to all of the reformed cavalry units that I talked about just a little bit ago. And then once you get to turn 100, you get access to the Numidian late camels. These guys are very useful to your cause. Highly recommend you try to get them involved in your armies as quickly as possible, and they will help you deal with the Roman cavalry that you almost certainly have to fight in order to survive. While this section isn't all that big, it is a very massive deal in that it makes the reforms unique by requiring certain aspects of territory to be taken. It basically means that you need to unify all of the African tribes around you to basically form a united Numidia. And once you do that, the idea is that all of your military advisors basically learn from the people that you've conquered, and you'll get access to some reformed units and some Carthaginian units as well. As Carthage begins its war with Rome, it makes sense that many of the Carthaginians begin to migrate and escape Rome's wrath by migrating deeper into Numidia, and as a result of that, they will have a very heavy influence on your military and your potential. So I really like this change, and I really hope you guys enjoy chasing these reform events. And you will get events for this, by the way. It will be obvious what you need to do, so that is very helpful. Next up, we're going to talk about the Civil War mechanic for the Masaesyli. Now, basically, this is based entirely on the premise of the Masaesyli fighting the Masaesyli. Historically, these were both two Numidian factions that were loyal to Carthage. However, eventually, the Masaesyli betrayed Carthage in the Second Punic War, and as a result, they wiped out the Masaesyli, which is who you would be playing as if you're using the submod, and they joined Rome and eventually basically became a client state. So this entire Civil War event is based on the premise that even though this is a little bit early historically, the Masaesyli have basically rebelled against Carthage and you, and as a result, you are now having a Numidian-style civil war. You won't lose any of your actual own territories when this event begins, but the Masaesyli and any territory that they own will turn hostile towards you. And Carthage, of course. So hopefully your Carthaginian masters can help you deal with them. Although I've usually had Carthage get peace with the Masaesyli pretty quickly, but that's just in my limited testing. So the bottom line is that you will be fighting the Masaesyli. Once you take out the Masaesyli, then it should help you out massively in your last section we talked about, which was your reforms. Take over their territory, go southeast and take on the Garamatians, and go west and take on the Gatuli, also known as the Maori in this, or the Mori in this submod. The name has been changed, by the way. Take them out, and then you'll get access to your new reforms that we just talked about, so that will be very nice. However, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are not playing as a Masaesyli and you still have this mod turned on, apparently most of the time the Masaesyli will probably beat the Masaesyli and then Carthage in addition. This rebellion usually occurs after 25 to 30 turns, so it is still in the early game, but it can occur at a time where Carthage is vulnerable, and generally speaking that means that the Masaesyli will usually win the civil war, take out Carthage and become allies with Rome, and eventually they might even become a client state of Rome to try and mimic the historical accuracy of what actually happened with the Masaesyli. However, that is only if you're not playing as a Masaesyli. If you are playing as a Masaesyli, then I recommend within the first 5 to 10 turns, you end up basically declaring war on the Masaesyli anyway. Although if you do so, the Masaesyli are currently a client state of Carthage, so the Carthaginians might not appreciate it, but then if you do rush and take out the Masaesyli, they'll only have the one city, which is Capsa, which should be very easy for you to take out, and it basically guarantees that you'll win the civil war. So it's up to you how you want to play it. Do you want to try and appease your Carthaginian masters and wait for the Masaesyli to betray you? Or do you make your parents mad, attack the Masaesyli early on, make sure you knock them out nice and quickly and not lose too many men in the process, but potentially make the Carthaginians want to declare war on you themselves? There's a lot of different ways you can approach this civil war. Despite it looking fairly black and white, it's actually quite complex, and it could determine how well or bad your early campaign goes. And now for the last major point of this video, we'll be talking about the buildings added in this submod. The mod adds 4 new temples which replace the Arabic style temples that were present before in vanilla DEI. Plus it also adds a level 5 special monument temple. These temples and buildings all have their own little unique buffs and debuffs. I'm not going to go into detail about that. However, the main thing that you need to be aware of with this is that not only is it historically accurate, which massive props to Swaraj for that, that's really cool, but the second biggest thing is that it provides a dual cultural system for the Masaesyli. That's right, if you use the Baal or the Tanit temples, then you will have to deal with Punic culture increasing. It is just only for those 2 temples, so if you don't want to use those temples, that's fine. You won't have to deal with the dual cultural aspect that is added in with this submod. However, if you do want to use those temples and their benefits, you do need to be aware that Punic culture will slowly increase over time, and if you don't specialize some governors to deal with it, you might even end up getting some Punic style revolts in the mid to late game. It's something that kind of creeps up on you if you're not aware of it. The Egyptians have this, as do the Nervii at this point. So if you've played those campaigns, then you'll have to deal with very similar stuff here, although it is easily avoided if you just don't want to use those buildings. But ladies and gentlemen, that is basically it for this submod. There is a few extra things that are really cool and do add a little bit of extra flavor. For example, there is a new government type that's been added. They have the Tribal Confederation, the Republic option, the Kingdom, and Empire as options, whereas before, the Masaesyli government was based entirely on the Eastern style of governing. In addition, there's also a brand new cinematic intro when you actually start up the mod. Not a video or anything, but like your game will have your camera and a description in the top left corner, and it will basically float between all of these different cities. There's been some minor flag changes to the Masaesyli, and like I said, the Gaituli are renamed to the Maori, or the Mori, however you want to pronounce it. But yeah, there's basically a bunch of smaller things that come in addition with this mod. I just wanted to talk about the big features, the things that will hopefully get you guys excited to check out this awesome mod, because wow, this mod, it really breathes life into the Masaesyli, who are usually, in my own opinion, one of the most bland kind of factions to play as. I never really wanted to play as them before, or I did, but there was just no real incentive to do it. There wasn't anything all that unique about them. If I play Carthage, then why would I bother playing the Masaesyli when I get a very similar experience either way? But now, thanks to user Swaraj giving us this awesome submod, we now have an entirely new experience to go ahead with, and I actually even hope that eventually this becomes part of base DEI, because I think it is that good. It's that high level quality modding work as well. The mod itself runs flawlessly without issues, and it was developed very quickly by just Swaraj, who did fantastic, so massive props to him. He's an incredibly talented modder, and of course all credit for the mod goes to him. I'm just doing a video on it. I'm not involved at all with the development. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions about this submod, please do post them down below and I'll do my best to help you out. I will also leave a link to the download page for this mod. Go in there, make sure you read the description, check everything out, make sure that you're not missing anything, and make sure that you're not going to break your own mod list. But generally speaking, you should be fine with using this, and it even has a few compatibility patches already with other mods, such as the alternative economy submod for DEI, which I know a lot of people love using, myself included, so thank you Swaraj for those as well. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.